Hello, everybody. So try to ignore the Frozen musical happening in the background. I am alone with my son today because my youngest son has been in the hospital for 4 days. And so I have no extra hands today. Um, but let's just get into our first day of public speaking. And I know that some of you might be terrified, but again, don't worry. I promise that we're going to get through this together. And hopefully today can be a little bit inspiring about what public speaking is and the possibilities and really what it's done for us historically. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and you'll be able to see what I'm looking at. So let's talk about powerful speakers. I want you to try to think of what public speakers or public figure has given a speech that has really affected you or changed you in some way, that really maybe inspired you or changed your vision of the world or your perspective. I was lucky enough to meet Archbishop Desmond Tutu on a semester at sea, and he's one of the most kind, amazing human beings. He really worked to end apartheid with Nelson Mandela. And this is just one of my favorite quotes that he said in one of his speeches, which is, I can't for the life of me imagine that God will say, I will punish you because you are Black. You should have been white. I will punish you because you are a woman. You should have been a man. I will punish you because you are a homosexual. You ought to have been heterosexual. I can't for the life of me believe that that is how God sees things. But let's start at the basics. What is communication? Why is it important? What does it do for us? Now, we have 4 needs as human beings. This is what keeps us well-rounded and keeps us healthy both in mind and body. So that first need is physical. We need physical touch as human beings. To have our brains and our bodies be most well adjusted, we need physical touch. And of course, this is on a spectrum. Some people need more, some people need less. But as human beings, we need physical touch to be healthy. Again, there is an opposite side to this where physical touch can be traumatizing or not okay. But we're looking at, hugs and pats and handshakes and all these things that we do to connect to other humans. The second need is identity. So this is we learn who we are. Our identity comes from how people talk about us, how they talk to us, right? When we are learning, when we're growing up, we learn about who we are in the world around us through who we see. So our parents or our caregivers or our siblings, the people that we have relationships with. The third is social, and that is relationships. We are social creatures. We need to be able to have constant kind of stimulation to be able to communicate with somebody else and learn about them. We want to feel needed and wanted and loved, and we want to give that to other people. And so we have these relationships that keep us motivated and keep us going. And then the last is practical. And this is really simple. We need to be able to communicate to get things done. If I ask you for a pen, you're able to give me a pen. But if I didn't have verbal language or even nonverbal, which would be me going, then there's no way we could communicate anything. Nothing would get done because I couldn't do anything. But since we have language and nonverbal communication, I can, gesture to say hello without actually saying hello. I can draw up blueprints because nonverbal is also drawing and creating art, right? The first kind of level of communication we saw with humans were drawings on, cave etchings. And that was communicating something to one another through pictures. So, on a very practical level, we communicate just to get stuff done. There's no way I could teach you this class or teach you public speaking if I didn't have communication. So, this is just a very simple drawing of how communication happens, but I want to I want to emphasize some of the things in this picture. So, the communication model we have as humans is, let's say that I am the speaker, right? All of you are the audience. Now, I am sending a message to you consistently. The message is not just the words that I'm speaking, but it's also my nonverbal behavior. It's what I'm wearing. It's how I've done my hair and my makeup because I'm trying to communicate something about my status or whether you should trust me or not. The message is also the tone in which that I'm delivering it, right? So my tone of voice. And so when you're getting this message, I am also getting something from you. And that's that bottom arrow that we see as feedback. So right now, I'm giving you a message. I'm talking to you both with words, which is the content, but also context, and with my tone of voice and my facial expressions and my hand gestures to really emphasize what I'm saying. Your feedback is often nonverbal in, if we were in a classroom doing this face to face, your nonverbal feedback would be, head shakes. It would be um eye contact. I can tell that you're listening by you looking at me, but I can also tell if you have verbal feedback. So if you're saying, oh, yes, oh, oh, I've had that, right? Those kinds of things let me know that you're not only listening, you're understanding and you're agreeing. But I can read other types of feedback. If you're asleep at your desk, I can tell that maybe my message isn't getting through to you. If you have your arms crossed and you look mad, I can probably also tell that maybe my message is boring or you're not liking the content. So this is what we do all day long with people, is that we are sending a message, they're sending feedback back continuously. This does not stop. It's a loop, right? And then they send us a message and we're continuously giving them feedback. If I yawn during when someone's speaking, I'm giving them feedback that maybe I don't find it interesting, but it also could just be I'm tired, right? So we're consistently communicating something with one another through verbal and nonverbal. Nonverbal, again, are those handshakes, blinking of the eyes, facial expressions, gestures that you're making, clothing that you're wearing, how you're doing your hair and makeup, how you walk, all of these things. Whereas the message is the content, the actual words I'm saying. So that's pretty easy to understand. I'm giving a message, I'm getting feedback from you as I'm giving you that message. And the cool thing with public speaking is that I'm always reading your feedback. So if I'm giving a speech and I see that people in the audience are getting angry and they're physically moving their body like a little bit closer and maybe adjusting, and they're having a frown and they're getting a little scowl on their face, I can say, so it looks like what I just said was fairly upsetting to some people in the audience. Let me clarify what I meant by this. Right? If you see somebody getting tired, you can always walk up and get a little bit closer and a little bit louder and say, well, what did you think about that? Right? So you can consistently take the feedback and change the way your message is being conveyed. And that's how you become a really good, not just public speaker, but a good communicator. Because I can change how I'm communicating with you based on how I'm reading your feedback, your nonverbals, and your verbal communication with me. Now, the channel of communication is where is this message taking place? Right now, the channel of communication in this class is video and not simultaneous video. I'm recording this without you here. And then you're going to watch this and be able to respond and give feedback when you're watching it when I'm not watching you. So we have a very specific channel of communication that has its own limitations. You're not able to ask questions right here, right now, if you have a question about it. You kind of have to remember it, write it down, and send it to me later, or ask it in office hours when we are face to face. Another channel of communication would be if we were right in the same room together. It's easier to read feedback. I can, be with all of you at the same time. Channel of communication could also be via text. We lose things with texting, don't we? Have you ever gotten a text that you misread or it sounded angry, and so you responded with something a little snooty and they're like, why are you so mad? Right? And especially in our generation or the generation below mine, all of the above, we tend to, if I get a text on my phone and I have written them saying, do you want to do lunch today? And they say, sure, with a period. I go, oh, maybe they don't actually want to go to lunch with me. But to some people, sure just means yes. Right. And so that channel is going to have limitations like texting, where I can't read facial expressions when you're texting. I can't read the tone of your voice when you're doing it. I can't tell if you're being sarcastic or if you're being honest. And so the channel that we choose in which to communicate via email or text message or phone, where you can't see them, but you can hear at least the tone of their voice, or fax. I mean, I don't know who faxes, letters that you send to each other. You're losing something and gaining maybe something else. So the channel is as important as the communication content, what you're saying to them, because it'll change how that message is received. So this is just a basic understanding of how you communicate in the channel will change how the message is received. Now, let's look at also the context, right? That's everything happening around us. So that's the place, the time, the environment that you're in, right? If I was in a classroom, the context would be the classroom. There's a lot of people in the room. So there's a lot of noise, which we're going to get to in just a second, but that can prohibit some people from getting my message because there's a lot of people. If we're outside, it's going to be harder for you to get a message rather than being inside. If my microphone cuts out or my internet goes out, I can't communicate with you anymore. And so the environment has changed the way that I have to communicate with you. The pandemic has changed the channel and the context of the communication event that we are having now. And then lastly, let's talk about noise. These are all things that are going to be, important for you to think about when you're giving your speech, especially when you're recording it and giving it to us via technology, right? So noise is anything that prohibits the audience from getting your message. So that could be literal noise, like a jackhammer outside, or my son listening to Frozen in the background that is totally distracting to me right now. um, could be a trash truck, or something happening outside that actually is audible. But noise can also be so many other things. It could be physiological, meaning in your body for you or the audience. So if you're hungry and you go to give a speech, you might feel a little drowsy and you might feel like you're not on the top of your game because all you can think about is just eating a big old burger after, right? The audience could be hungry as well. They could be tired. So your actual, level of awake and alertness can be noise that prohibits you from getting the message. You could be sick. I mean, how many of you have gone to a lecture sick and you can barely understand what is happening because you feel like crap? If you have a menstrual period, any type of cramps, if you have a broken leg, if you have anything hormonal, if you have anxiety, depression, OCD, ADHD, any of these things, if you have a learning disability, all of that can be noise that is happening to prohibit you from getting the message. But also, if you got bad news and you still have to go to your lecture and you're trying to pay attention, but it's just impossible, or you broke up with somebody, or you just can't get yourself out of your head and you're daydreaming, all of those things are normal, but they cause noise, which prohibits us from receiving the message correctly, right? So noise happens all the time because we're just human. We have a lot of needs. So the goal as a good communicator is to try to recognize when maybe noise is getting in the way of someone understanding your message. A lot of the time you can see the feedback and the noise that they may be experiencing, especially if you're talking to somebody and they pick up their phone and they're like, uh-huh, yeah. Crazy, crazy, crazy. I could pretty easily tell that noise right now is distraction in the form of this phone. And so I might say, "Hey, would you mind putting down your phone? I really want to talk to you about this." So this works on an interpersonal level as relationships, as well as it does as a public speaker. But as a public speaker, we're up against all of these. I mean, in general, we're up against all of these things all at once. But it's easier when it's one on one. As a public speaker, you have an audience. Now, you in this class are having to do this not in front of people, you're having to do this in front of a camera. So, noise could also be things that would distract us from your message. So, if your lighting is really poor in your video, I'm going to be focused on the fact that I can't see anything that's happening. If you have a whole bunch of stuff in the background, I'm going to be looking at your house and trying to find out more about you because I'm like, oh, look, they have a trophy, and oh, there's a fish tank, and oh, they have a fan that's on the ceiling that I see that's moving and it's changing the color in the room. All of those things you want to try to minimize so that we're focused on you and your message. Noise could also be what you're wearing. If you're wearing something really revealing, or you're wearing something that's very out loud that has a lot of text on it, I'm not listening to you anymore. I'm looking at your shirt. If you are, if there's literal noise like a dog barking in the background, or there's planes going on overhead, or your family's fighting in the background, that's going to distract us. If your video is this way, right? So, what is this called? Oh my God. Not portrait mode, but landscape mode. That is going to be better for us in some ways and worse for us in others, right? Because you need to position yourself so that we can see you from the hips up. If it's portrait mode, we might be able to see you better, but we might also see, we might be level with your crotch. We don't want that. We want to be able to really be level with your face so that we are getting the content from your mouth and being able to see your gestures. But we don't really want a lot of stuff happening in the background. We don't really want any distractions. So that's where noise comes in for you in this class. So making sure that you have good lighting, good audio. That's another actual noise thing. If it keeps cutting in and out or we can't hear you, then we're not listening. And the whole point of doing public speaking is to have a message that is so important that other people want to hear. And if we can't hear it, we can't see it, we're too distracted by other things to hear it. What was the point in the first place? So we want to do this right. So when you're thinking about recording your speech, you will have practiced it several times. And you will be up there confident, knowing what your speech is, and you will have thought about how to minimize distraction. Right? My background has very minimal distraction. It does have that photo of my husband and I. So if you were really interested, you could be looking at that instead of what I'm talking about, right? But I could reduce that. I mean, my son dropping things in the background. Hey, Ollie, are you okay? He's fine, right? Like those things are distracting. So we want to try to minimize that. That's why I'm breaking my own rules. Now, there's this idea in communication that one cannot not communicate. There's no way that I could not communicate something to you. Even me sitting here going like this is definitely me communicating something. You might not know what it is. You might say, oh, she doesn't know she's being recorded, or she's ignoring us, or she's waiting for us to respond, or whatever it might be. But everything we do as humans communicates something. So how I've dressed today communicates something to you. How I've done my makeup and my hair, the background that I have is communicating how I want to be seen, right? So everything you do is going to communicate something, and you just want to try to minimize the distraction for that. So, what you wear to your speech is going to be important. Don't wear something that is, again, revealing or too distracting. We don't want you to wear a hat while you're giving a speech because that covers your face. And we don't want you holding up cards here because that covers your face. I mean, there's so much we're communicating. Okay. Quick history of public speaking. So in ancient Greece, to be considered a fully functioning citizen of the nation, you must have been able to eloquently speak in the agora. The agora was kind of this like meeting place where people would literally stand up on a kind of like a soapbox and speak their truth and what they want for their lives in ancient Greece at that time. Unfortunately, women were not allowed in the agora, but men were. And again, if you couldn't speak eloquently, if you didn't communicate well and try to, tell people what you need from your government or your city, then you were not seen as kind of a fully functioning citizen. But did you know that even though women were not technically allowed in the agora, Aspasia of Miletus was called the mother of rhetoric? So it was actually kind of started from a woman, but then it became Aristotle, where he added ethos, pathos, and logos, which we are going to learn about in this class, not right now. Now, the types of speeches. We have informative speeches, which are literally to inform. Persuasive, where we try to change someone's mind about something. Invitational. I often do it with groups of people where we have one topic of discussion, and we often discuss the pros and the cons of that issue. And so what we do is we'll give two sides of an issue, but no persuasion. I'm not trying to persuade you on this side or this side. I'm giving you just actual scientific, factual information about two sides of an issue, and then I let you decide. So this would be kind of like an open panel discussion that you might have been to before, or when your town council has people come and kind of give their, ask about certain things in their environment. And all of it is just to say, I'm going to give you all the information, and then I'm going to let you decide what you think about all of that information. Impromptu is really what we see in debate a lot of the time, which is you are given a topic and you have to kind of come up with a speech right then and there that follows a certain outline. We're not going to do impromptu in this class. That's more of a speech and debate thing. If you want to go into speech and debate, I highly recommend it. It helps you become a better speaker right off the top. And then the last are special occasion speeches. And those are ones that happen on special occasions for very specific things. And I will give you an example of a few of those. These could include job interviews, any presentation for school or for work, teaching. So, what I'm doing right now is public speaking, training, prayer is actually seen as kind of a public speaking event, eulogies and toasts. So, toasts at weddings, eulogies at a funeral, testimony. So if you've ever had to testify on someone's behalf or for your own behalf in the court of law, that's public speaking. A sales pitch. So if you work in an industry like Best Buy, or even, oh my gosh, I worked at Best Buy and I worked at Bubba Gump Shrimp Company as a server for so long. And that was a sales pitch. I always had to try and upsell because they were, these Bubba Gump Shrimp Company is a worldwide corporation. And so I always had to, try to persuade them to get the hurricane or whatever. Parties where you might make a toast or you might speak with somebody, there's kind of a script that you go through. Any sort of event, conference calls, networking, when you're meeting people for, the sake of your goals or your education or your career. And then meetings, when you're in a meeting and you want to share something, all of these things are kind of on the special occasion, or are special occasion, but are also slightly impromptu. So, this is why learning how to outline a speech, which we're going to do very much in this class, will help you in all of these ways to kind of impromptu learn how to speak eloquently. Now, the public speaking model is pretty simple. It's first understanding your audience. So, who are you speaking to? Right? That'll help you find what your goal is for this public speaking event. If I know I'm going to go talk to a bunch of high schoolers, that's an important distinction to make for how I choose my language, right? If I'm going to go talk to a group of seniors at an elderly home, it's going to change what I'm deciding to speak about. So that's the speaking goal. What am I speaking about and who am I speaking to? Because if I go to an old, in an elderly community, I'm probably not going to talk about memes, just because that's a different generation that may not understand memes. It doesn't mean that all of them don't, but it generally, a lot of people who are in a generation that didn't grow up with memes don't understand them, right? Same thing is if I go and talk to high school students, I'm probably not going to talk about a 401k. That would be so boring and not where they are at all in their world. So understanding who your audience is based on demographics, but also, why you're there to speak in the first place helps you build what you're going to talk about. Then you choose the elements of your speech that will engage your audience on your topic. So if you understand your audience and you understand what you're going to be talking about that is framed for that audience, then you can start choosing, well, what's going to be interesting to that audience? So let's say that I'm talking to high school students and I'm going to talk to them about peer pressure. They might not be interested, but I guarantee that since I know a little bit about them and peer pressure, I can choose elements to the speech that will be interesting for them to listen to, that will want to engage them, right? And so thinking about, what can I talk about? What kind of evidence can I use in my speech? And what maybe I could use a video that's really interesting that people would love to see to get them engaged and interested in my topic. Not just, okay, I'm talking to teens about peer pressure. What would a teen want to hear about peer pressure? Because at first they'll be like, oh, we have to hear about peer pressure. But I could be smart enough to think, okay, what would a teenager want to see? Even if the topic itself, which is appropriate for them, is not maybe as interesting. So that's what you can do, is you can plan ahead of time what you're doing for the audience. Then the last part is just delivering that speech effectively. And that's what you're going to learn in this class, is how to do all three of these things. How do we know who our audience is? How do we deliver a topic that's interesting to them? How do we choose all the elements of the speech that keeps them interested? And then how do we deliver it in a way that's interesting as well? Because if you deliver it, you could have the most amazing speech, but deliver it like, yeah, so today we're talking about peer pressure. I bet you all have had that, huh? Cool. So peer pressure basically is, right? I mean, I'm already bored stiff of what I'm saying. So delivering it with enthusiasm, hand gestures, things that make you an engaging host are going to be important. Okay. Now, what does the public speaking delivery entail? Content, that's the words and language that you actually use. So that's what's written down in your outline. And we're going to talk about outlining later. Verbal, so that's your tone. Tone is what we use to change the emphasis and also change the emotion in our voice. Inflection, right? Inflection or inflection, right? That's where we put emphasis on a word. And when we use inflection, that tells the audience what's important for them to hear, which word is really key. Rate is how fast or slow we're speaking. I'm sure you're familiar with this. If someone's speaking too slowly, you really, really want to finish their sentence for them because it's so crazy that they're talking so slow. And so you're losing interest, and eventually you just kind of go off into a dreamland. If they're speaking too fast, you're losing what they're talking about because you can't really make out any other word, right? So we want to try and find a medium place where we're speaking at a really good rate, and changing it up is really good. Changing the rate when I'm getting excited, we tend to speak a little faster, which is good. Just don't speak too fast. When I get more serious, I get a little bit slower and lower in my tone because it's going to really highlight a different emotion and a different feeling. Using pauses is really effective. Using volume to change all the things that you're saying is going to keep the audience interested, because if you're monotone the whole time, we lose interest. Then there's the nonverbal and the visual. So again, the clothes that you wear, how you've done your hair, your posture, right? The gestures that you use, your body movement, if you're sitting or you're standing, your facial expressions. All of those are going to communicate to your audience what you want them to feel. So if I'll give you an example, I had a student doing a speech about animal cruelty, and he did it like this. 1 out of every 4 animals will be killed in their own home. And the audience did not know what to do. We were all sitting there like, is he happy about it? Oh my God, what? And so we really have to be very careful with our facial expressions and the verbal, the tone and all of that stuff, because it's going to tell the audience how you should feel about this, right? But also body posture and your body movement communicate something. So in this class, I want you to use gestures and I want you to use body movement. But if you are standing and giving your speech and this is all I'm seeing, I need you to be able to be here so that I can see your face and your hips up. But also if you're walking back and forth and you're moving and you're going, like all of those things are going to be distracting as I scooch. So your body movement should be 2 feet planted. Gestures are great to use because it makes you look engaged and comfortable, but it's something that we need to practice, right? So if you're not somebody who uses your hands when you speak, then we'll learn on how to, make 1 point with your hand. And later you do another point with your hand. We will work on that. However, if you're somebody who uses your hands all the time, it could get crazy. And then, now I'm just looking at these weird body movements instead of what you're talking about. So all of this is a balance, and we're going to learn how to do this slowly. Now, the last kind of part is, why speak in public in the first place? What is the point? There's a lot of points. 1, speaking in public is really a personal development thing. The more we speak in public, the better we get at communicating with other people, right? So that leads to number 2. It improves our own social skills and our relationships. If you learn how to speak well in public, you also learn how to speak better in your relationships, right? And then 3rd, which I think is really the one that we're the most familiar with, is influencing the world around you. How many times have we seen speeches that have actually changed the world in some way? I know sometimes it feels like our message is falling on deaf ears, right? The Parkland shooting, and then Emma, I can't remember, Emma Gonzalez, I think her last name is. She gave this speech about being there, watching her friends get slaughtered with guns in front of her, saying we need to implement gun control. And it kind of felt like it fell on deaf ears, but it didn't. We are still trying to have conversations about how do we make schools safer from gun violence, right? So even if you think that your words aren't changing, they definitely are, because they're adding to this conversation as a whole. So we have this message, and if we keep seeing that message over and over from different people, we start to take it more seriously. I've already seen this in my years alive, right? I used to see body shaming all the time on social media. I mean, when I was in high school, it was MySpace, but MySpace was one of the first social media websites where you could see body shaming happening, and you saw it in media and you saw it in all these advertisements. And then now, as I'm on Instagram, I see so many body positive messages, and it changes everything. But it's also personal development. So, developing leadership skills and becoming a thought leader is really why we want to be good at public speaking, because you can move people, you can inspire people, you can become a leader in even small settings if you can communicate what you want very clearly. It also has improved our memory, right? Learning speeches and remembering what we have to do improves your memory over time. It actually increases your confidence. It's a total fake it till you make it thing where you'll be nervous getting up to go do a speech, but the more you do it, the more confident you get in your ability to communicate. It actually also enhances your ability to listen and empathize with other people when they are speaking. It enhances your ability to persuade and communicate your ideas clearly and succinctly. And I bet a lot of you are thinking, wow, I wish I could persuade better, especially during this kind of odd time of political unrest. And then you also have greater emotional control, and you have greater control over your body movements because it's all practice that you're doing. So, social skills and relationships, we have less anxiety and fear when speaking to others. We have greater social influence. We have great increased ability engaging with new people. We build stronger, longer lasting relationships, and it opens up career possibilities. If you can do well in public speaking, you can do well in an interview. If you can speak in public and be really clear about your message and learn what outline that goes based on, right? You can just absolutely nail those interviews because you get better at understanding feedback from others while they're listening, and you get better at knowing how to communicate your message succinctly and specifically and with passion. And the last, of course, influencing the world around you. So again, I come back to this idea of maybe it feels like us doing speeches hasn't changed much, but I want to challenge that. So Eleanor Roosevelt drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. After delivering a speech urging the assembly to adopt the declaration, the very next day, the UN unanimously accepted it. So because she was so persuasive and so passionate in that speech, the UN drafted the Declaration of Human Rights, which gives us the wrongs and the rights of how we treat humans in our world. Sojourner Truth gave a speech at a women's convention in 1851 that addressed, we think for the first time, intersectionality. So let me give you a little bit of background. Sojourner Truth was a powerful Black woman who fought for civil rights and fought for women's rights. More specifically, though, at that time in 1851, women were fighting for the right to vote. However, that did not include women of color. So Sojourner Truth really stepped up and said, let's talk about intersectionality. You can't have feminism if it's only for white women. And she started to build this idea in her speech called Anti-Woman. It's now since become kind of a very popular poem. And she said basically that white women are treated very well by men and they're helped into carriages and lifted over ditches, but I'm not, and aren't I still a woman? And so she was really trying to call attention to the fact that Black women and women of color were not included in that conversation at the time, and really started to change that idea of who had rights and who didn't. Lastly, Queen Elizabeth gave a rousing speech to the troops at Tilbury when they were facing a defeat from the Spanish Armada, and 9 days later, they secured victory. And they were way less prepared than anybody else. Oh my gosh, look at this kid. Nelson Mandela gave a speech regarding the apartheid in South Africa. It didn't save him from prison, but it encouraged an uprising in the country, which eventually led to the end of the apartheid. Gandhi delivered a speech imploring the British to quit India when India was under British reign. And that day they passed a resolution on the issue. And 5 years later, India was released as their own nation. And lastly, Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his I Have a Dream speech in 1963 in the March on Washington. And a few years later, the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act was past. So don't think that your words fall on deaf ears. It may seem like it and it may take time, but the more we speak our truths, speak our voices, and talk about to the world what it is that we want as human beings, it will happen. We just have to have confidence. So I'm going to show you a few of the speeches just to inspire you a little bit. Hold on, y'all.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Okay, so if that gives you total chills like it does for me, this will even be better. He gave this speech, I've been to the mountaintop, the day before he was assassinated. And the interesting thing is that in that speech, he says, I may not get there with you, but I know that we will get there someday. Such powerful, powerful words. And now another one from Kobe Bryant.
Once upon a time, there was a young basketball player who had dreams of becoming one of the greatest basketball players of all time.
My name is Kobe Bryant, 17 years old, with the hunger, the motivation, and a desire to be the best possible basketball player that I can be.
He works day and night, every day, for years and years and years and years and years. And as time went on, 20 years had passed, and he felt that he had accomplished all that he set out to accomplish. But what he come to realize is that the goal that he set out initially of becoming the greatest of all time was a very fickle one. And when you realize that the most important thing in life is how your career moves and touches those around you and how it carries forward to the next generation. When you realize that's what makes true greatness. The story would be about transformation of a kid looking inwardly to then growing up and understanding the importance and the power of looking outward. It's a great feeling to know that you set a goal for yourself and you were able to reach that goal and to knock it down. If I had the power to turn back time, I would never use it. I don't think about it, because then every moment that you go through means absolutely nothing, because you can always go back and do it again. So it loses its flavor, it loses its beauty. When things are final and, you know, moments won't ever come again. To be able to have the power to go back and re-experience those things it's silly to me.
When you take that jersey off for the final time, how do you think you're gonna feel?
Very at peace with it, and I'm very thankful, you know, for the 20 years that I've had, and ready to go.
Oh boy, it gets me every time. What's awesome about this is that you might think that some careers you go into won't need public speaking, but that's just not true. Even a basketball player, even football players, even software engineers like my husband have had to give speeches and do interviews. And it's always so impressive when somebody has this ability to move people. And Kobe Bryant had that. I love that they showed clips of him when he was in his college days doing his own public speaking class. And that prepared him for being able to do interviews like the one that we just saw, where he speaks so eloquently and so beautifully and in metaphor and in just ways that really move people. And so if you ever want to be an influencer, this is something you need to be able to learn to do, is how to speak in a way that moves people. Here's one more for you. Actually, I have a few more, but
हमें इस बात पर फख्र होना चाहिए कि हम में से एक लड़की उठी है और वो पाकिस्तान बल्कि पूरी एशिया में बस एक ही लड़की है, एक सिंबॉलिक लड़की है। मैं ऐसा पाकिस्तान देखती हूँ जहाँ सब बच्चे तालीम याफ्ता हो, जहाँ स्कूल्स हो, जहाँ सेहत का ख्याल रखा जाए, जहाँ पे सफाई हो।
सवात में लड़कियों की तालीम के लिए जिद्दोजहद करने वाली बच्ची मलाला यूसुफजई की गाड़ी पर फायरिंग, मलाला यूसुफजई समेत 3 बच्चियां जख्मी।
जब लड़का ऊपर आ गया वैन में मैदान में खड़ा होकर और उसने कहा कि आप में से मलाला कौन है, लेकिन जब उसके हाथ में हम पिस्तौल देकर तो हम बहुत चीखें मारे और कहा कि नहीं, बचाओ बचाओ।
जो शख्स पीछे है तो उन्होंने हमसे पूछा कि आप में से मलाला यूसुफजई कौन है, तो हमने सब उसकी तरफ देखा।
मलाला को देखकर उसने डायरेक्ट फायरिंग की। जब मलाला को फायर लगी तो वो वैन में एकदम नीचे गिर गई।
हमारे स्कूल को बम से उड़ा दिया गया था, हम स्कूल नहीं जा सकती थी क्योंकि और जो बच्चे स्कूल जाते थे उसे भी मार दिया जाता था और स्कूल बमों से उड़ा दिया जाती थी। बस हम फिर स्कूल नहीं गए उसके बाद।
प्यारी मलाला, आपने हमें ये पैगाम दिया था कि हर लड़की को तालीम हासिल करनी चाहिए।
तुमने अपने आप को खतरे में डाला ताकि हम स्कूल जा सके।
मलाला, हम सब मिलकर पाकिस्तान को तब्दील करेंगे। मलाला, आप अकेली नहीं हो।
This is the second life. This is the new life, and I want to serve the people.
Let us pick up our books and our pens. They are our most powerful weapons. One child, one teacher, one book, And one pen can change the world.
So I showed you this one because Malala Yousafzai, I mean, if you ever questioned whether your voice could make a difference, this is a great example. She was trying to fight for young girls' education, for young girls to be able to go to school, and the Taliban tried to silence her by killing her. She lived, and now she is making a difference in the lives of little girls every day. So if you ever thought your voice doesn't matter, well, it does. It does so much that some people want to try and stop that voice. I'm going to show you two more, one from Obama and then one from Amanda Gorman that we've seen recently. It's just a combo of a few of the ways that Obama was a really beautiful public speaker.
So in love with you. This is your victory. Now, I know you didn't do this just to win an election. I know you didn't do it for me. You did it because you understand the enormity of the task that lies ahead.
But my main message is to the parents of Trayvon Martin. You know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon.
They had their entire lives ahead of them. Birthdays, graduations, weddings, kids of their own. Among the fallen were also teachers, men and women who devoted their lives to helping our children fulfill their dreams. So our hearts are broken today. It's the idea held by generations of citizens who believe that America is a constant work in progress, who believe that loving this country requires more than singing its praises or avoiding uncomfortable truths. It requires the occasional disruption, the willingness to speak out for what is right, to shake up the status quo. That's America. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Facts, evidence, reason, logic, an understanding of science. These are good things. These are qualities you want in people making policy. Black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American, young, old, gay, straight, men, women, folks with disabilities, all pledging allegiance under the same proud flag to this big, bold country that we love. That's what I see. That's the America I know. Obama.
Okay. So obviously there's a lot to love there, but his charisma and his ability to put together just beautiful words that move mountains is incredible. But also I want to draw attention to his empathy, right? When he talks about the Parkland shooting and really just all the school shootings that happened that he had talked about, he always got emotional, but he didn't go over the top. You know, he would try to wipe away his tears and be able to communicate sadness so that people knew the gravity of the situation and show that he actually cared, right? And it's just incredible to see that in a leader. Okay, now I'm going to show us one last video. If you didn't see this live, then you're seeing it now.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade. The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny Black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with. Every breath from my bronze pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the windswept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our our country, our people diverse and beautiful will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Wow.
Chills, 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 chills. Holy cow. Okay, so those are just a few things to get you motivated to think about how words really do inspire us. And I want for your little homework to think about who's inspired you with words and just leave it in the discussion on Canvas. You know, you can put a video in there of the person speaking, or you can just kind of say who it is. I'd just love to see who's inspired you. All right, everybody have a great day. Bye.